Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with Lexie. This whole series, mini series, has come out of the office hours that I was inspired by Lexie, actually. And so I was just posting this, and she was the first one to submit a wonderful question, which at first was more on the anonymous side. But then after I held my office hours, she was really, really excited to talk about this a little bit more in detail and also share it with more open heart and right here with me. So I'm super excited to have her here with me today and just talking about this particular question that she had, which was dating and the letting go of pitfalls throughout this whole experience. And we're not going to go back to what we discussed back then or what I brought in, because obviously, since the last time we discussed this, a lot has happened. We first hear something, when we first put it out there is a certain way that we think about it, and then we hear new inputs and things are changing. So before I even talk more about what my perspectives are, I would like to hear from you, Lexie. Welcome. And yeah, let us hear from you today.
Oh, thank you so much, Raditya, for hosting me on your office hours today, and also for responding to my questions so quickly and compassionately. So my question was about dating and letting go, and I was coming from a place maybe of frustration and blame and, why is this happening to me? And your response I felt was very caring and compassionate. It helped me turn my focus outward to the external world, more to inside to the internal world, and thinking about where are my foundations for love, and being able to see that my foundations for love come from my heart, they come here, and just able to acknowledge that I am a loving human being. And I found it very empowering of a response. And not a response for me to engage in more blame or frustration or argument, but it was a very compassionate response to look inward and see, okay, how am I here for myself? How am I showing up for myself? How am I taking care of myself? And do I have, strengths, but then also weaknesses? Do I have any weaknesses or flaws or things that I need to nurture and give some love to? So I found your response very compassionate, and also a response that for almost any frustrations that we deal with, whether it's dating relationships or relationships with family or relationships with coworkers, I found your response very versatile, and very open-ended. And I really appreciated it because at the end of the day, I want to show up for myself, and I want to be responsible for my own actions, and I want to feel good taking action towards them. So I really just really appreciated you. And, in the beginning, I was feeling very vulnerable and also wanting to maintain anonymous. But I think now what has shifted is feeling this spark of empowerment and encouragement, and wanting to engage in these discussions actively, even if there is a little bit of vulnerability, because I think a lot of our community out here in the world needs some reminders that we all have foundations for love within us, and it's so easy to place um, searching for love or seeking for love outside in the outside world, when we have so much of it inside of us all.
Beautiful. Yeah, so greatly put, because we don't learn how to do that, right? It's much easier to teach someone how to take in information from the outside. It's much easier to tell someone, read this book and take things in, right? And so it's in our society that it's harder to learn from our internal instincts and guidance and information, because it's much easier to teach, because then I can just do it more versatile, like a universal, right? Like it's like, here, we all reading the same thing, not realizing that even if we're reading the same passages, if we're reading the same books, we still were interpreting it or translating it in a different way, right? We don't understand it the same way because of all of our past experiences. And when we integrate it that way, when we understand that that is just to the means of how things go, the external world is that is, we can then understand that there's just two worlds that we find ourselves in. And so by recognizing that there's two parts that meet us inside, it's actually with no surprise that it's a difficult in everyday challenges, right? Like we just tried to do a live on Instagram where we've been thrown in and out a few times within 30 minutes. And that's sometimes how life goes. Sometimes life on the external world throws us around the roller coaster that we don't know where up and down is. And then it also happens that we feel the same way on the internal. Sometimes external, it's all peaceful and nice, nothing's happening, and we get upset about nothing. When in fact, something internally, especially for us women, there's things happening even more so than for men that we don't even know are happening, right? And so when we understand that there's a lot going on, internal and external, it becomes so obvious that it is not easy to differentiate where I'm going to pay attention to, because it's not that I should only listen to my internal, I should only listen to the external. Like that's not what it's
Mm.
about. It's really differentiating between, okay, is this something that I should be listening to my internal, or is this something I should be listening to the external? Is there something externally that I could gain some more input in? Or is it maybe an internal? Or maybe it's both. And I need to figure out how can these two work together.
Oh, I think that's so insightful and so beautiful. I haven't really heard it that way. And just to reflect back, I drew a Venn diagram on my notebook here, one side the internal world and the other side the external world, and thinking that, yeah, when we wake up in the morning or you go to school and you learn a subject, a lot of that is you wake up in the morning, you look in the mirror, you're seeing external world, or you go to school and you read from books and you're learning from your teachers, and that's very much an exchange with the external world. And so lately, I've been uncovering, since maybe embarking on my spiritual journey in 2018, what what is wrong with me, but almost that things are resonating, things are off on my internal world. I'm doing a lot of things, interacting and engaging with the external world, and maybe doing things on the traditional good girl path, go to school, get a degree, get a job. But I have these other questions that are bubbling up, like, what is my purpose in life? Why am I here? What is the meaning of my existence? And that is very much the internal side. And in some of my even spiritual trainings, it's led me down to some teachers. Um, but they're teaching things that are more of the internal world, and exploration. So if it's mindfulness or meditation type techniques, or even dance and yoga, but rather than being used to looking at yourself or looking at others in that external environment, it's an opportunity to reflect within. And so I don't know, I just drew two circles on the paper, the internal world on one side in the Venn diagram, the external world on the other, and then where they merge is kind of like I just wrote the sweet spot, but I am still very much in the learner or exploration stages of like where is that sweet spot, and I feel like a new person on a journey, on a quest of this inward world, so I can go in to explore and bring things out into the external environment that I wish to see more of. And even if it's just more pieces of me that I'm pulling out of my internal to bring out to the external, I think one of the reasons why I have these questions bubbling up is what is my purpose? Why am I here? What is the meaning of my life? Because I'm seeing the external environment. I've learned a lot of things about it, and I've worked in nonprofits and government service where sometimes we're not actually fulfilling all of our missions or visions, or we're not always bridging the gaps, and that could be an illusion. I'm sure we're doing a lot of great work, but it bubbles up these questions inside of me of like, why am I here? What is my purpose? You know, if this is our mission on paper, and then these are the outcomes that we're seeing or that I'm seeing, and they don't seem to measure up. You know, how can we make a change, a positive impact? And I've been in some workplaces where, you know, we're given more autonomy to go make an impact. And then I've been in other workplaces where, you know, we're very limited in what we can do. And I'll have these frustrations bubble up because in my internal world, I might see that there's some really easy solutions. And some of the solutions are just having tough conversations or collaborating with others. But sometimes the external world doesn't see it that way, or I'm not effectively communicating to my colleagues, you know, ways to see the solutions that I'm seeing. And and so you know, that makes me very passionate about finding purpose for myself and for others. Um, but it's kind of right there is where I'm hitting this like wall of my internal and external, and I'm sometimes feeling like I'm trying to like a demolition crew trying to break down that wall, and it just feels like a fight, you know? And so what are those things that I can do to create less friction of a fight and more flow? And so that would be like the sweet spot of the Venn diagram. But I might have to journal. I'll have to journal on that a lot. and and maybe for weeks, months, or lifetimes. But
And I think
um
you're
yeah.
pointing in the right direction because this is not something like, oh, I'm gonna take a test in XY time and then I got it, right? This part of the journey, that journey to inner peace, isn't a journey that will, now I have inner peace, right? Like that's not what it is, right? And even the purpose, like even if you figure out like, oh, this is the purpose, I got it. Once you get closer to that purpose is something else again, because a purpose isn't something static. It's not something finite, it's something infinite, it's something always changing because we are changing, right? And so
Mm,
the invitation here is really to, okay, be aware and present. I mean, that's what really meditation is about. And in tomorrow's office hour, I will definitely talk about that aspect of meditation. Like, what is the purpose of meditation? Why is meditation such a great tool? And why and how can I use this to my everyday? And it's not the meditation of just, I'm going to sit here and have no thoughts. That is not the only meditation. That can be a type of meditation. It could be the meditation when life is overwhelming and we just want to focus on our breath. Like that could be one go to. But meditation to me is to have a greater listening ear to what's going on internal and external, to find that sweet spot of like, oh, okay, I'm getting closer. And then, oh, I'm noticing, as you mentioned, this friction between. And that friction isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just feeling that resistance and that push and pull because it's not there yet, right? And instead of avoiding that piece, instead of trying to not feel that resistance, is to become curious about
mm,
that resistance and wondering like, okay, where is the resistance? Is the resistance because I feel a push from my inside, from my internal experience that wants to come through, and there is a push from the external because it's not meeting it? And then the question is not to change my external, or like we talked in another conversation about our environments, to change my environment, but more so, okay, what in my internal do I need to adjust so it fits into that external? And it's not, because my point is always not to make one or the other part more important. They're like the yin and yang. They're like black and white. They're like dark and light. It's like energy, the negative and positive, right? And to look at it that we need both, but they can't work in resistance of each other. And so how to let go of resistance is not going to be my task, right? I can't tell you how to let go of resistance. What it will take, and what I can say, is that it asks us to let go one or the other. Let go of the
Mm,
idea of one thing that has to be, let's say, using the external world. I have to have a job, I have to make a certain amount to be alive and living, to make a living, right? To meet those expectations. Then I have the friction of, let's say, three other things in my intern. I want to unconditionally love myself and other people. I want to be compassionate with myself. I want to give self-care to myself, right? Those don't always work well together, but they can intermingle with each other, that sometimes this is a focus and then another times this is the focus. And so that our focuses shift within a day, within a moment. So if I feel, okay, as a basis, as we are all human beings, we need to make a living. We need to, that's just a need. This is not a choice. It's not a choice to make money. It's a choice how you make money, but it's not a choice that you make money unless you choose to live somewhere that you can self support yourself with food, electricity, power, whatever not, right? If you can't do this, then this is not for you. Then you probably have other things to cope with. But then, if you are in the world that we both are living in the world where we want to have our home, our own home, where we want to be able to maybe go on vacation, maybe buy the food we want to buy, and not be constrained by depending on other locations that provide us with shelter and food. You can choose that path too, right? Like, you don't have to have a home. You could live in a shelter if you wanted to. If you can go to places where they provide you with food, but you have limited choices. You have limited ways of living, right? So most of us would choose, no, I want to provide for myself. And when we choose that, we will come automatically into the place of, like, okay, there are places that I'm okay with how I make money, but then there is a payoff to that. So whatever you choose, whatever difficulty you find yourself in, there is consequence. And the question is, what consequences am I willing to be with?
mm.
And so that's really where it goes, right?
Yes. So we have some autonomy and some choices. We all have basic needs. And I always have to jot down some notes to keep organized here. But it really speaks to me in, choosing to provide for myself, and I'm capable and I have means to. I know there's some people that want to provide for themselves, but maybe they're without a home and so they're unable to. I have family and I do have a home. Um, and so, I'm really fortunate, and I just want to take a moment to express that I am really fortunate, and I come from a background where I've always had food on the table, and I've always been able to keep a job, but I always want more, and so that's sometimes where there's a friction, and not necessarily more money, but different, a more different experience. Um, and so part of that sometimes think about is going to school. I used to like to say, if you teach a woman economics, she's going to be a lot of trouble, you know? And so sometimes I think those frustrations come up from things I have learned in school, which things in school, at least in education here in America, is is very much centered around capitalism and around the external environment. And so I think it is lacking that maybe that human centered or spiritual centered awareness. And I understand and I respect separation of church and state. And I think we need to have that. But there sometimes is lacking this. These tools or teachings for just awareness of the internal world and awareness how to adjust and how do we cope before it gets to the point of, say, being hospitalized and having all these frustrations stacking up. I really love just some of your comments about finding the sweet spot. and shifting our focus maybe between both the internal and external world. So, like listening to our environments and listening to where are the frustrations arising, and then what do we have control to change mostly is the internal world and maybe our immediate environment around us. So, like our desk or our bedroom, if it's messy, to clean that up, clean up that clutter can help clean up the mind and clean up the internal world. But you had also mentioned that that sweet spot or the internal external world is always changing, and even our purpose could always be changing. So as we're moving closer to one purpose, that almost like the goalpost, as we're making each goalpost closer, that the purpose is adapting and changing and evolving along the way. And I think that's really powerful too. And it just reminds me in some of our meditation practices or learning about the human body that our body is in constant motion, even when we're sleeping. And our body is like a whole universe of cells and organs and wonders that we can't see because it's all inside of us. So even when I look in the mirror in the morning, I'm just seeing the external Alexis. But there are practices out there to like high five yourself or tell yourself that you love you, or do maybe a body scan meditation where you relax all your muscles and your tissues, or you give thanks to your organs, and just as another way to relax and release. And you'd also mentioned letting go. And I think, finding comfort with change is a great practice because things are always changing, circumstances are always changing. The cells in our body are constantly changing and moving. Um, and we can see things as things are growth, or there's maybe also death and decay to make room for more growth, and just even cycles of change. And so I was just reflecting a lot on having respect for that, and that could be one guiding principle maybe for finding the sweet spot on the journey to inner peace, because that journey is going to be constantly evolving and changing each waking moment and day by day.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going, and that's exactly what you're pointing at. And that's what mindfulness really is moment by moment by moment by moment. So that I don't get overwhelmed with what's coming up ahead, but I'm just focusing on what's happening right here, right now. And then right here, right now, and right here, right now. So with every step. So another thing that we often say is like, oh, take a leap of faith. And I say, take a step of faith. Like instead of feeling like, oh, I need to like jump across and go, I don't know where, I can just make small steps and see that as a faith, a leap of faith, right? Like that one step is already out of my comfort zone. And so, because if I think of a leap, it already makes me like more afraid. So let's do that smallest step that I can do that maybe pushes a little bit of my comfort, but is still comforting enough that I'm willing to do that step. And then another one and another one. And all of a sudden, you've taken so many small steps and you look back and you're like, wow, that was pretty impressive, right? But you might not see it as impressive. It might be your external that says like, OMG, Lexie, I can't believe you did this. And you're like, what did I just do? Well, you went from here to here. And you'll be like, yeah, but it took me like XY years to get here. It's like, they don't know that.
So I really like this, taking a step of faith rather than taking a leap of faith. That provides me more comfort as well, because then I can really step into the moment. A leap of faith almost sounds like you're taking a leap and skipping a bunch of moments that are in between. Um, and so yeah, I think I really like that, take a step of faith. It just gives more power to the moment and power to us, because sometimes it, no matter what, it's one step in front of the other, and taking a leap requires like a running start and a lot of energy, and you're taking usually just one leap, and that leap has been planned, you know, and I think it's easier to have faith in one step at a time than it is to just, I'm not an Olympian that can just leap leap around, you know? I'm thinking like, wow, you have to be like training for a lifetime to take leaps of faith, but I can take a step of faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
that's nice.
I think what's also interesting about our conversation today, and if I think about many other conversations I've had in the past, is like we always make like we want big things to happen, right? And like only if I can see like how large something is, the more of an impact it has made. And we get to be reminded often that the smallest thing, like me drinking this tea and it just smells a certain way, and like gives a refreshment, or if I was a little colder earlier and I was like drinking this hot tea makes me warm up, that is what makes that moment special. But
Mhm,
having a bunch of different teas in my cabinet, and like all of them, I can't drink them all at the same time. I still have to drink one at a time and enjoy each one. So when we buy or get more excited and like happy and like feel like more fulfilled when it's something big, and like, oh my god, look at the degree that I got, or look at the job that I have, or look at that
mhm,
house that I have, that yes, it's great, but it will just feel the same way in a few moments as if I'm taking a sip out of my teacup. So the moment after will just disappear just the same. Doesn't matter how big
mm,
something is, the trip that you took, whatever it is, right? Like you might remember them as vividly in that moment, and it might feel so much more abundant than your backyard. But if you can enjoy the backyard to the extent you can enjoy that special vacation you took, you're gifted more often than not. And you don't have to wait till that next big trip is coming. And talking about finances, you don't have to pay a big amount to enjoy nature in the backyard. And that's why I loved how you started off when you referred to, oh, when I want to take some moments to myself, I take a moment outside, go, in the park, or some fresh air, or whatever it was. And it was so small that you were referring to, that you actually feel rejuvenated to go back to the work that you were doing behind a computer, right? So to really reframe on like, yeah, because you were saying something earlier. I don't want to have, like you were talking about more. Like I want to have more, not necessarily more money, but just more of these experiences, right? I think that's what you're referring to.
yes, more experiences like of inner peace, and I think part of it is first recognizing when these emotions come up, bubble up within me. So a lot of times I would just, before maybe my spiritual awakening, just be in the moment and just either be super happy or super frustrated. And it would just, I didn't, that was my reality. But now my reality is I'll have an emotion and I am able to kind of take a step back from it to observe it. I might still feel that emotion for sure. So I'm not turning off my feelings, but I'll be like, huh, I'm really frustrated right now, And so what I need is an abundance of non frustration to help, conquer that overwhelm. So that's where it's like, okay, time to get out of the office and do a quick walk, take a breath of fresh air, because it's nice to see the nature, and the nature doesn't look frustrated. I mean, I'm sure the trees or the birds and the bees might have their own frustrations, but at least me observing it and witnessing it is just so beautiful. And it's a moment for me to tap out of that external environment that might be frustrating, briefly change my environment, calm my mind and my nervous system, and then return to work.
And you're obviously already way ahead of most, because most people want more money, more this, more that, like the physical part of more, right? And you already have either known this or felt this for longer periods, that that's not going to make you happier. It's not going to bring you more peace. It actually can bring you more stress because you have more of that burden that it has to be more, right? But when you go like you have accomplished, you already have that inner peace because you know what to do to make yourself come back to self, come back to home, come back to that place that brings you joy. And so when we reframe that part, when we understand that to be happy doesn't look in that way, you know?
Yes, yeah, because if you do have more on the material side, in one way, it can require more maintenance, and that could require more stress. So having less can be more in the sense of having more peace of mind or calm and clarity when there is a storm.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where meditation falls in, right? And meditation of like, okay, let me be the observer of what's happening. Like you said, oh, when I observe nature, it gives me a piece of peace, a piece of peace.
Mhm.
Gives me a calmness. It takes away my frustration. And like we said at the beginning, what if we can't change the environment? What if we can't get outside? What if I can't get a sense of nature to calm my frustration down? How can I get it while I'm sitting here being frustrated and upset, right? Is to like close my eyes. And like you also mentioned earlier, to get into that universe that we have internal, to widen that horizon, to deepen that connection. And obviously, our breath can help us get more in depth with that connection of insight and inside. So if you breathe in and exhale out, and whatever thoughts you're having, you're not becoming part of those thoughts, you're just observing those thoughts, just like you observe nature.
Yes, it is observing the nature of our thoughts
Yeah.
and just, oh, and you had even brought up earlier, meditation is not about clearing all those thoughts. It is more about observing them and learning from them. And I know that there have been studies done with, I think it was like the Maharishi University, where they do a lot of research on consciousness and meditation. They did some studies working with veterans who had PTSD, and they're finding that the individuals who have traumatic experiences and during meditation, they observe those thoughts and they're working with professionals, therapists, and others. But the ones who observe the thoughts and not just wipe them clean, they're the ones that are able to transform their lives. And so that just gives a little bit of evidence to, it's not about clearing the mind and ignoring the thoughts. It really is about observing them, learning from them. Is it bubbling up emotions? Are they negative emotions? And then we can go to, our therapist or our coach and talk to them about, this was coming up in a meditation, and it's how do I break this pattern or cycle? This keeps coming up and it keeps giving me some kind of a grief or an adverse reaction. And I think even just the process of observing it as neutrally as possible and then talking about it with a safe person can help make those emotions less volatile over time and to find a little bit more peace of how to deal with them, because no matter what, they're going to be kind of stuck inside of us until we acknowledge it, and acknowledge it with some sort of a compassion or a neutral, um, rather than maybe observing it with a lot of anger or resentment, or back to the beginning, like, "Why is this happening to me?"
Yeah, and also when we become better at observing, we don't take it on. We don't make it us. And we then detach that egoism and that self-centered experience with something more universal. Because then we start recognizing that it's not about me or I or whatever I'm my experience. It's about human experience. Like
Yes.
it's a natural thing. It's not something to beat ourselves up because we're not meeting a certain standard. It's actually becoming more unison with each other because then I see you and I was like, "Oh my God, you too? Oh, I didn't realize." Instead of thinking like, "Why me?" Because then I
Mm,
just by saying that, "Why me?" it makes me cringe in my heart. It makes me feel lessened. It feels makes me feel disconnected from you. But if I say like, wow, you too, you go through that too. We experience human experiences. We have difficulties of connecting internally as well as externally. We have a tough time of moving through our daily lives. We are having a tough time. It makes it less heavy on us. It actually releases pressure on us. It makes us more human. So to say it the most simple, right? Yeah.
yeah, yes. No, it does. I think a lot of us are struggling, and even happiness can have a stigma to it, like, "Oh, you have to be happy," you know? But I think, it's what about we can be happy and we can be sad, and acknowledging, I think, that other side of us, and that is what brings us together. And rather than saying, why me, why am I so sad, it's more like, hey, I had this difficult situation, and then that usually opens up a conversation because then the other person will acknowledge it, even with, even with your office hours. I think your office hours provide so much value, is bringing in a question, and then you're able to acknowledge that question, and it made me, at the end of the day, feel so much more human and so much more neutral to what I had been feeling. And you had provided a lot of insight, and so I thank you for that, because it was kind of just like, gosh, I screwed up again, or this is happening again, or I'm stuck in this cycle. And that is kind of that ego voice, or in other teachings too, maybe the inner critic is always piping up, and and kind of being harsh. And um so even just thinking about you and your philosophy of be human, be happy, be you, well, the foundations are in love, and I think love is a lot stronger vibration than the vibrations of the inner critic or the inner judge. It's just like getting myself to rewrite the narrative or the dialogue on the inside so that lover can come forward when I'm having an experience. And in a loving way, could the lover comes forward and not persecute my critic or judge, but and if it's coming forward and persecuting them, then that's not the lover coming forward, that's still my
Exactly.
critic or judge. So it's like, hold on here, this critic or judge is in disguise. um and I think that's where, yeah, just having moments to slow down the breath, slow down the thoughts. And if I'm catching myself, to be like, okay, who's talking to me right now? Is it my judge? Is it my critic? Um, is it is it the Spanish Inquisition, the Inquisitor? you know? And I'm like, okay, let's slow down a little bit. Where is the lover? And I think sometimes that part of me or part of us gets suppressed. And so it takes nurturing to bring it out. And I think the honesty would be with my flaws or my weaknesses, and honest, like, hey, these are my flaws and my weaknesses, but you know what? I'm still one whole healthy human. I can still walk, I can still talk. Um, I have a roof over my head, I have groceries in the fridge, and I have some tea in my cabinet. But it's slowing down to the moment of like, well, what am I doing in this moment? Okay, well, I'm enjoying this cup of tea, and this cup of tea is awakening my senses, and the aromas are beautiful. And I think just leaning into that moment becomes a way that you can unlock that lover, the self-love.
Yeah, 100%. And there's so many great things that you touched on. And I almost, it almost is that part when you talked about that inner critic, that judge, that prosecutor, whatever the Spanish Inquisition, right? Those are the external parts. Even if we say inner critic, it's not me, the inner critic. It's actually the external part that is in comparison to the external world, to society, to how we were raised, how the people see one another, right? That's the external. But the moment you said love, that's you on the inside. Because
Mm.
we are nothing other than love. That's the human nature. Human nature is love. Everything else, whenever everything else speaks up, it's the external world coming in. And that's where we connect the two together. It's like we cannot be without it. It's good to have an inner critic. It's good to have someone questioning our actions. It's good to someone asking like, "Oh, I don't know if that was a good choice. I don't know. Maybe we gotta like revisit this piece." That's good, right? It's not good to have it on a constant because then our nervous system is on alert. Ooh, what did I do wrong again? Oh no, there he stands again, or she. Like, oh my God, what they're trying to tell me? They are after me, right? But then I can, exactly like you said, take that step back or take that deep breath, or can just collect myself and ask myself, okay, so what piece of love can I bring forward now? How can I now bring those inner critics to that sweet spot where it actually makes sense that, yes, I need to be critical of this right now. I need to ask myself, am I supposed to be in this relationship or not? Is it maybe true that I'm afraid to enter this relationship for XYZ reasons? And is there a piece of love that I can trust that it's worth trying it out? Because it doesn't mean we have to find that person who's going to be the one. Maybe it just takes, and that's actually one question I had for you is like,
Mm.
even though there have been many of these relationships that you came out of, where you ask, like, again? Why again? Why me? Do you feel that every single time it happened again, it was a different version of you going through that experience?
Ooh, I think I need to evolve a part of myself. And part of it's what resonated with your response, and that involvement would be the foundation of self-love. So almost thinking that I need something from the external to love me, to validate that I am lovable and that I have love within. Almost, I went through a period where I was really upset at Disney movies because I grew up in the era of a lot of Disney movies where the princess would find a prince charming, and then they would ride away into the sunset, and it would be happily ever after. So kinda coming from a background where, I did have a lot of my needs met, but then I thought, "Oh, my purpose is to, like, kind of find a man and get married, and then everything will be great." And I always had my inner critic in me telling me not to get married to these people, so that was good. I had something in there. And part of it was just because there was enough financial or emotional stress in the relationship that it didn't that seemed like a dead end. So I had that critic kinda checking me, um, and so I think that's a part of me where it was the same Alexis was showing up and kind of with the same purpose or the same reason of, "Oh, this will be the one," and maybe getting into long-term relationships without doing the self relationship first, so right now, I think it is like this time of to be on my own, to date myself. I've known some people out there that they've actually, like, gotten married to themselves, like, in an emotional, spiritual way, like, to show a commitment to the
Commitment.
self. And they've done that before they've gone moved forward to, like, even meeting the love of their life and being in a long-term healthy relationship. So I think that's another reason why I'm passionate about this inward job, and what resonated so much even with your response was it kind of broke my pattern again of why is this happening? I must be doing something bad, or you know, I must be a bad person, to, well, no, I am a good person. I've been trying my best. I've just made some mistakes, and I think always being open to people, so not judging people to be like, "Oh, I'm never gonna date again," or "I need to, like, have this timeline or time limit of it's gonna take this long for me to date myself first." And I think what would be different would be, okay, well, before jumping into anything new, I need to date myself for a while. I need to take care of Alexis. I need to make sure I can show up for her and prove to her that I love her unconditionally. And I almost think just even saying that now, I've dated people too where they're like, "I need unconditional love and support." But it's almost like the only one who can do unconditional love is the self, and it would be self-love, and then almost like you shouldn't put conditions on others. I mean, we should love ourselves, we should love our children if we have children, and then anyone else who wants to love us in return is just like a gift, and it should be like sunlight, like the topping on the cake, right? Or sunlight that helps you grow. So maybe I can be somebody else's sunlight, and I would like somebody else to be my sunlight, but right now I'm just going to focus on me and my garden and how I'm growing, and how I'm showing up. I felt like too, I cracked the code, and you already said this, but just to reiterate, the internal world and the external world, like a yin and yang, and finding that sweet spot in the middle. And we were talking about always changing and letting go, but you had mentioned specifically that that sweet spot could be like love, would be finding what's in the middle. There's things in the external world that are love, but then we have love within us. And so maybe that's where the connection, the convergence between the two circles are in the Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Um, and that would be like, where do we go? What do we pay attention to? Okay, where is the love within me? Where is the love within the external environment? And, finding contentment with that. So again, back to the, taking things step by step, a step of faith would be like, okay, I'm having this moment right now. It's negative, but I know that there's love within me. And I know there's love in my external environment. Maybe it's a cup of tea. Maybe it's this delicious pineapple juice I was drinking, but finding joy in, okay, I've got love right here. I'm gonna find it by taking a few breaths. And then maybe in my external environment, do I have something? And it could be like picking up my pen and journaling, um, writing down those thoughts or emotions. And then even that is like a healthy release, because maybe I don't say it to the person, I can at least acknowledge it, say it, and heal from it from there. Or have like this pineapple juice, the aroma, it just smells so delicious. It feels like being on a tropical vacation. Like, and I don't need to take a vacation. I just need to get away and have this pineapple juice and sit outside for a moment. And that would be like maybe the sweet spot between finding the love between the internal and the external, and the simplicity, because things are always going to be changing, and it gives me a moment to let go. What am I letting go of? It doesn't mean I'm letting go of my big purpose, dream, or desire, and that, oh, everything is just messed up now, but I'm letting go of maybe my control of my expectations for that internal, external world. And I'm letting go of the idea that I have to take a leap of faith when all I need to do is just go step by step.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, beautifully concluded all the things we discussed. And I really think that, one of the big aspects is that we forget, like we have all these, you have this ability of our thoughts to pretend to be in the future and make us afraid of the future or get excited or happy about the future or the past or whatever, right? We have this capacity. And just like you described with your pineapple juice, is like we have the capacity to imagine things. So our imagination can make us feel a certain way. We don't need to be there physically to feel it, because the worst thing that can happen is like you get there and then there's a storm happening, and in your imagination at home it was so much better how it's going to turn out than how it ended up being, right? So when we become more accustomed to the abilities that we have right here in this body without having to do or go anywhere, we can live the life that we want to live without having them. And so by acknowledging that what we have is already a representation of that, because everything else is just an imagination as well, right? So me imagining that I need to have a bigger house or more cars or more this is just an imagination. Doesn't mean that when I have them I actually will feel that way, but I can already make myself feel that way before I even have all those things. And I be enough with just those things in my mind, right? And so, and funny enough, if you haven't had the chance to get my book, the what you talked about, the Prince Charming, I have exactly written that down. Is that we've been watching these movies where we have these happy endings, and we just imagine it to be this beautiful piece, but then when we wake up into reality, that we're gonna have discussions, we're gonna have conflict, we're gonna have, even with the people we love, we're gonna have conflicts. And when we, like you beautifully said, if we're not attending to that piece of me first, then nothing else in this world can actually make me happy. And this other piece of unconditional love, we can actually go into that next time, if you like to, is really that unconditional love, when we have established it for ourselves, when we have established it for pets and our children, and maybe with a partner, it is
Mhm.
possible when you actually have accomplished it with yourself fully, which is already very difficult, because the moment you drop your favorite cup and it breaks, or you have a gift, like you have a best friend, you forgot a birthday gift, you already fall into conditional love for yourself,
Mm.
because you're going to blame yourself for not remembering, for yourself for being so thoughtless, and like, oh my god, how dare I do this, right? Like, it's so easy and quickly that we fall into these patterns, and that's okay. That's when unconditional love is most powerful. That's when you are in a partnership, and even with the stranger on the street that cuts you off in traffic, or you crossing the street and someone doesn't stop for you, whatever that moment is where you get upset about someone in your life for a brief moment, that's when you practice unconditional love. Because unconditional love, the moment I have a condition, isn't conditional love, is conditional love, right? And so we fall very quickly out of unconditional love. It's almost impossible to always be in unconditional love with life. But when that is our practice, when that is our way of being, I have no other way than to be in love with the way of life. And so that will help me to be more in unconditional love. And that will not be limited to who, it's just going to be unlimited into how. And when I can let go of that how, that's who you are. You are unconditional love. And that has nothing to do with who is in your environment or not.
Mm. Oh, that's beautiful. I would love to explore that more.
All right.
I think, yeah, that could be a whole we could maybe do one of our next talks on that. I think there would be a lot there.
Yeah, I mean, for next time, just reflect. Obviously, I'm going to share this video, and feel free to like reflect on it and have your thoughts around it. And then we can next time just start right there. Like, what has this conversation embarked you on? What journey?
Mhm.
How has it, brought you to inner peace? What are some parts that maybe were still on the fence of like, oh yeah, I don't know about this part in my life or about myself? How has these
Mm.
how has this conversation and your own reflection on today's conversation sparked, and yeah, what other thoughts are coming up so we can explore that next time.
Yes. Okay, yes, definitely. Even just on the thought of unconditional love, I was already putting conditions on it before you just explained what you were saying. So I I think there will be a lot to reflect on and a lot to carry forward, and I'm super excited to continue the discussion with you.
Me too. Thank you so much, Lexi, for your openness, for your willingness to do this with me and to be here. And I think we can do like here in the reactions, you can do it so it comes out.
Oh, yes, let's do some
Permanently change
reaction.
this. So, thank you so much. Yay!
Yay.
We're
And
loving ourselves some hearts here.
and I'm happy.
Yay. Thank you so
Love makes
much.
me
And
happy.
till next time.
Till next time. Thank you so much, Raditya. You are the best.
Thank you.
Have the best day.
Take care, you too.